and welcome everyone for joining us on Earth Day. I can't think of a better way to spend this day than with fellow educators who are dedicated to preparing students to engage as informed citizens in our connected world. So before diving into our dynamic agenda, I want to briefly share how we hope to support you as you navigate this very challenging time we're in. CFR Education is the educational arm of the Council on Foreign Relations. We help middle, high school, and higher ed students understand today's most pressing global issues. And we're excited to announce that we now offer a comprehensive library of nonpartisan multimedia teaching and learning resources on climate change and its implications for global affairs and foreign policy. We've also leveraged these resources to create a free 3-course specialization on Coursera. It's called Climate Change and Global Affairs, Navigating Our Warming World. You'll have an opportunity to hear more about all of these resources as the event goes on today. So exactly what is it we hope to accomplish today? First, we're going to kick off the session with a brief interview with a Council on Foreign Relations expert to learn about the state of climate change today. Then we'll hear from a panel of education leaders who will speak about why climate change education is so important in 2025, followed by a brief Q&A. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to join a breakout room of your choice covering the organization that interests you the most, where you can learn about more about resources and tools for teaching this important topic. And of course, you'll have a chance to ask some questions. But before we leap in, we want to hear a little bit about you. You should see a Zoom poll pop up on your screen. And if you don't see the poll, you can answer this question in the chat. And the question is this: how prepared do you feel to teach about climate change? And it goes without saying there is no right or wrong answer here. So again, the question, how prepared do you feel to teach about climate change? And I'll give you a couple more moments to answer. Oh boy, very prepared. So, okay. Well, for those of you who don't feel prepared, you're not alone. A recent EdWeek survey showed that complete 80% of K-12 teachers and administrators want to teach about climate change, but they just simply don't feel sufficiently knowledgeable to do so. So let's get knowledgeable about this. I'd like to introduce Varun Sivaram, Senior Fellow for Energy and Climate at the Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome, Varun, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask Varun a couple of questions. The first question, it's a big sweeping one, is how is climate change affecting the world today?
Well, thank you so much, Carrie. And first, I'm delighted to see all of the educators on the call today. I'm also delighted to hear that so many of you are so well prepared to teach about this critical subject. Now, today, I would normally say Happy Earth Day, Carrie, but I must say it's an unhappy Earth Day from my perspective. And the reason for that is climate change is ravaging the globe. 2024 was the starkest warning yet. The temperatures peaked at 1.55 degrees on average in 2024, above the pre industrial average. Beyond that, the world saw over 155 unprecedented disasters, from heat waves in Japan to soaring temperatures from Western Australia to Mali to Iran, record rains in Italy and Spain, flash floods in Pakistan and Brazil, and hurricanes and typhoons. We know about them, Helene in the United States, but also Super Typhoon Yagi that affected 6 million people in Vietnam. There has been an exacerbation, an intensification of disasters from climate change, and no corner of the world is untouched. And the worst part of it all is that the underlying cause of climate change, which is anthropogenic or human caused greenhouse gas emissions, that cause is increasing, not decreasing. Human greenhouse gas emissions increased in 2024. Human use of fossil fuels around the world increased in 2024, and they show no signs of peaking or reducing. Moreover, energy, where many have talked about an emerging clean energy transition, energy use continues to increase from all sources, not just clean energy. And so, even though we have more solar and more wind, more electric vehicles, we also have more gas and coal and oil use. The net result is no end in sight for climate change, and that's a very dangerous future to contend with.
Wow, sobering response. I don't think many people will be surprised to hear those observations, though. So, Varun, what are some of the ways that humans are addressing climate change today?
Well, look, I am fundamentally an optimist. It might not sound that way for my first answer, but I'm an optimist because I think that we have the tools and the technological capabilities to avert the most cataclysmic consequences of climate change. Now, let me be clear. We launched the CFR Climate Realism Initiative to dispense with magical thinking. The world will not meet its climate targets. We will not meet the 2-degree target. We won't meet the 1.5-degree target. We won't meet net zero by 2050. You should forget about it.
Mm.
We're on track for 3 degrees Celsius or 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit temperature increase this century. But we can avert the truly catastrophic consequences of even worse climate change, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, etc. Technology will play a critical role. Already, we've developed cost-effective solar technologies, wind technologies, battery technologies, electric vehicle technologies, and we're on the cusp of developing new technologies for even more advanced batteries or next generation geothermal, next generation nuclear power. We already have quite effective nuclear power today. There's a range of technologies. Now, we're still missing some very critical technologies for zero carbon steel or technologies for long distance zero carbon transportation and green fuels. But we'll get there. And I'm optimistic that technology, along with some political will, is what it's going to take for the world to eventually, this century, reduce its greenhouse gas emissions and start to confront climate change. It'll happen later than it needs to happen. We will incur very, very bad impacts this century, but there are already efforts underway. Last year, around the world, we saw real progress. I'll give you an example. The country of Pakistan imported 22 gigawatts of solar panels, largely from China. This was a banner year for solar. Solar around the world was deployed at a rate of nearly 600 gigawatts. You know, when I wrote my book, Taming the Sun, on the future of solar power in 2018, I believe that in the year 2024, we might install 200 to 300 gigawatts. We knocked that out of the water and out of the park, sorry, and we installed twice as many. So solar is a real bright spot for me around the world. And here in the United States, although we have slowed or are on track to slow our installations of solar and wind, I still believe that there is real potential in the United States for clean energy sources to reduce costs, energy costs, and improve energy security.
That's great. And I know that a lot of the folks who are on this call are interested in understanding ways that they can avoid this gloom and doom that their students feel. So hearing you address some of these ways that humans are grappling with climate change and effectively, and that there is hope is reassuring. Okay, so just one more question, Varun. What role can young people play in addressing climate change?
Absolutely. I think there are so many constructive things that young people can do. But I do want to make a point here. Young people have every right to be angry. We see a lot of anger from young people, and it is completely justified because the way that society functions today is that we prioritize the interests of older people. We do not prioritize the interests of younger people. And this is a brutal, ruthless truth, partially because young people can't vote in many cases. And when they can vote, those who are between 18 and 25 don't vote in very large numbers. We spend most of our fiscal space in the United States, in the advanced economies, and around the world on supporting old people and not supporting the interests of young people. And young people will bear the brunt of the climate impacts. When young people are old, when my son grows up, when we are 40 or 50 years in the future, the desolate world they confront will be a world that's our fault.
Mm.
Now, what can you do about it? There are 5 things you can do about it. Thing number 1, get out there and vote. Vote in droves for policies that support young people and the future. America should not be in excruciating debt. And around the world, countries need to focus on prioritizing the livelihoods, the social security, the safety nets of young people 50 years in the future. Second, develop next generation technologies. Young people have a chance to make a real difference in this world by becoming scientists, engineers, and working and starting companies that are going to bring revolutionary technologies that reduce the costs of clean energy, both in the fields that we already talked about, like the power sector, but also in these emerging fields, whether it's heavy duty transport, heavy duty industry, where we need technologies desperately. Third, build a career in public policy. We need policymakers who have great leverage to pass intelligent policies that reduce emissions, not just at home, but all over the world. 87% of emissions will occur over the next 75 years in China and emerging economies. So here, developing technologies or passing policies to develop next generation technologies can help the whole world. 4, get out there and travel. Like I mentioned, this is largely a problem of emissions in emerging economies and China. You want to solve the problem, go to the source. I spent years in India working in India's renewable energy transition. It's a critical way. And 5th, if you want to do something that affects your local community, it will not help to recycle or compost or put solar panels on your roof. These don't matter. What does matter is building adaptation and resilience to the difficult climate impacts that are going to affect your community. For your own family, go find a house or a place to live that is going to be better insulated from climate impacts than somewhere on the coast of Florida. And if you're working on your community, work with those in your community, your local city council, your state government, on investing in wildfire prevention and wildfire response, hurricane response, shelters, seawalls, and other forms of adaptation and resilience to protect your community. There is a near apocalypse coming. Now is the time to get really smart about preparing. I hope that's not too too
The,
uh, creepy a note to end on,
the
but it is
near
a very
apocalypse. No,
important
yeah.
warning.
Yeah, I mean, no, the climate realism initiative that Varun has launched at the council is called the Climate Realism Initiative because we are faced with a very serious apocalyptic-like challenge here, and time is of the essence. And so, these are really interesting takeaways that I hope that educators who are on this call can share with their students. Really appreciate it. Thank you for helping us set the stage for our conversation on the importance of climate education, Varun. I'd like to turn now to our esteemed panel of education leaders for a discussion on why climate change education is so important. So Rob, Margaret, and Alex, if you could please turn your cameras on, that would be great. And Varun, again, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you all could quickly introduce yourselves and let us know, I think we all know why we're here today, but a little bit about your background and what you bring to the table here in terms of the importance of climate education.
Sure, I'll start, Carrie. My name is Alex Tate. Hello, everyone. I am the geographer at the National Geographic Society, and that's with a capital T. It's a fun title and a challenge to live up to. My role is to work with all parts of National Geographic Society and with our education division in particular to bring the power of geography and mapping to better understand our ever-changing world. I work directly with our grantees. These are people that we fund around the world. We call them our explorers, to help them with geospatial technology and techniques for analyzing data and using maps to tell their stories. And I help all my education colleagues bring rich mapping tools and content to teachers and learners that are part of the National Geographic community, and that includes everybody. National Geographic Society has a long history of working with teachers to understand complex topics and to help students learn about their world. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues and to work with all of you that are attending.
That's great. Margaret?
Hi, everybody. My name is Margaret. I'm one of the co-founders and the executive director of SubjectToClimate. And our mission is to help all educators, all grade levels, all subjects integrate climate into what they already teach. So we're really focused on making it easier for you and making it very effective for your students. And this really comes from a background of being a teacher myself. I was a high school social studies teacher. A lot of people thought that, I was a science teacher teacher, but I truly believe that we as educators have a huge opportunity to be part of climate solutions through education. But I also recognize as an educator, we're always being told to fix the world's problems without given enough resources. So I'm really here today to help educators and show that, it's not a trade-off between what you already have to teach, but it's actually something that can enrich a student's educational experience, and we can change the world while doing it. So I'm very excited about that.
That's great. Rob, there you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Steiner. I'm the Director of Online Teacher Education Programs at the American Museum of Natural History here in New York. It's a pleasure to be here. We have our flagship program of online teacher professional learning seminars on science has served almost 25,000 educators over the last 25 years. We have a course on climate change, and we're just developing another one on teaching climate change. We've got a whole wealth of resources online and at the museum, and it's great to be here.
Well, welcome all of you. And again, thank you so much for participating today. So I've got a few questions for you, of course. And the first one is, what is the state of climate education in the United States today? And I think I'll throw to Margaret first here.
Thanks so much, Carrie. So I'm going to throw a couple of stats first that might be surprising for folks on this call. Despite everything that's going on, states are prioritizing climate. I believe maybe it's roughly around 12 or more states still have bills in progress or passed bills related to climate or environmental education. And many studies or polls show that around the 86% of teachers and 85% of parents support climate education in schools. So a lot of people think that, oh, there's just this resistance against it, but it's quite the opposite. There is a lot of support for it, and especially among our students. A lot of students that want to learn about climate change. I believe Ed Week shared, more than 65% students want to learn about it. And specifically, they want to know about the effects on them, on society, most importantly, what they can do about this. But most recently, another stat that I'll share out is that teenagers don't feel confident about their understanding of climate change. 12% feel like they know a lot. 10% feel like they know a lot about the solutions. So, I think in summary, there are states still prioritizing it. Teachers want to learn about it. Parents want teachers to teach about it, and students want to learn about it. So we have this opportunity to fill this gap, and this is the time to do it.
That's wonderful. Rob?
I think it's clear that that students are getting relatively little climate education. I know a national survey found that fairly recently, and so there is an enormous gap to be filled, and it varies, of course, a lot state to state, and that is where that's my sense of it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. Another question, why is it important to integrate climate change education across different subjects, across disciplines, if you will? Alex, there you are.
Yeah. So at National Geographic, we think it's important because climate change is a complex process that touches so many sciences and social sciences. I'm pleased to hear that Margaret was a social science teacher, that it really is cross-cutting, cross-disciplinary, and this is a chance to promote that sort of study for students, to understand that it's not just broken down into this is earth science, climate is under earth science. No, climate is a cross-cutting, and we, of course, think that geography and geographic tools are a great way to understand climate change. And we talk about what we term the geographic approach, which is to look at where things are happening, look at maps of data, develop some questions, try to do some analysis of that data, and then tell the story of what you've found, what you see. And we approach that sort of geographic inquiry as one of the main elements of working with teachers on teaching geography, science, and of course, climate change. This approach really touches not just on earth science. It touches on biology, distribution of plants and animals, and the effects of change on them. And of course, really importantly, the human footprint. And it's both an input to understanding climate change and, of course, an output of what are the consequences. And those are really important questions to bring to students.
That's great. Well, and as Varun highlighted earlier, almost every global issue facing us today is shaped by the effects of our changing climate. And students need to understand the causes and stakes that they face. So that's why making climate connections across subjects can deepen students' knowledge while making learning more relevant and impactful, whether it's how we address climate change, understand history to help us shape the future, use science to understand and evaluate new technologies, or use writing and literature to make sense of the changes in our lives. There's so many different ways that this applies. So thank you both. Here's a question that we hear from educators quite frequently, and that is, how do you keep climate change education hopeful and students feeling empowered? Alex, do you want to take that one?
Sure, sure. I'd like to highlight two programs that we have that we bring to youth in various different ways, and they help show that there are people that are looking for solutions. It's not just about researching the program, researching the science, researching the social science. It's about looking to solutions, and that's a hopeful way to look at it. Is how do we look to solutions for problems? We have one program called Explorer Classroom, where we bring our explorers, our scientists, our storytellers, virtually into classrooms. They get to tell their story about what they're doing. And so many of them work in local communities, looking for local solutions, looking for local adaptations, as Varun was talking about. One example I'd like to give is our Pristine Seas program that works with governments around the world to create marine protected areas. And they have a current program in New Guinea, in Papua New Guinea,
Oh, wow.
where they are working with the local communities and the local knowledge of the geographic situation. Where are the most important areas to protect? Where's the most diversity? And they're working with the local communities, and that knowledge helps them do their work so that they can then work with the government of Papua New Guinea to establish marine protected areas. So that's a local input into a solution for helping protect ocean areas to be more robust with climate change. A second program that we have is called the Slingshot Challenge, and this is for 13 to 18-year-olds to create a 1-minute video describing their ideas for solving an environmental issue. And it can relate to climate change or another environmental issue. And the awardees at the end, and there are a limited number of awardees, but the process of creating a 1-minute video is very educational, very important.
Yeah.
But the awardees then get funding to bring their idea to fruition. And there's a great example from Mexico called Seeds of Hope, where a group of teens put together a community plan to reforest an area that had been recently deforested, and how to have their community adapt to that. So that's another great example. It's looking at solutions, looking sort of towards the future with the youth.
So cool. I want to do all of these things. I'm just dying. This is great. I have 4 sons. They're, 20s, in their 20s and much older, but they would have loved to have done this. This is incredible. Margaret, what about you? How do you keep climate education hopeful and students feeling empowered?
Alex said it very well. Students, when they're doing something, when they're actively doing something and seeing that change and impact in their communities, that can really show them a path forward. And I want to add another layer to that sometimes as adults, we say that, hey, students, this is your problem to solve. You go out and do it. And that's just half of the story. I think what's really magical about the education system is that it's an intergenerational process of climate solution and climate action. teachers are working with students. So for example, in Subject to Climate, one of the things we offer is we share teacher developed lesson plans. So these are teachers across all grade levels and subjects who are, very rooted in their discipline and subjects. And we make them do training in climate, and then they create example lesson plans on how this might look like in their classroom. Again, going back to not adding another burden for educators, but how is a third grade teacher thinking about integrating climate? How is a ninth grade math teacher thinking about it? And in these lesson plan formats, we have a template where students we call it the 3 I's. It starts with inquiry, then it's investigation, but the third I is inspire. And on one hand, in some lesson plans, students are doing something, as Alex mentioned, in their backyard. They're doing something in their communities. They're part of the climate action. But I remember listening to Katherine Hayholt talk and saying that, it can be overwhelming when you're doing that yourself. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. And if you're the only one pushing it, it can feel, hopeless. And it's just moving a little bit. And sometimes that's great, but then you're like, I have so much more to go. How am I going to do it myself?
Mhm.
I think what's also important is to show students what other people are doing, how they're contributing, whether it's youth, whether it's ordinary everyday people, or whether it's, folks on, the government level or technology level, so that when you are pushing a boulder up, you're also seeing everybody else push it with you to help with that. And, the other resource I'll share is that the Climate Mental Health Network has just released or is releasing a mental health guide, that toolkit that really helps teachers on how to think about climate anxiety, and we'll be publishing a mental health guide in partnership with them. So I think those are just important things to consider when you want to make climate education hopeful and help students feel empowered.
Wow, I mean, that's really great, really interesting to hear. Rob, how do we keep climate education hopeful and students feeling empowered?
Well, I think Alex and Margaret did a great job touching on some of the key points. I think I think that, despite Varun's cautionary words,
Yeah.
I think that there is real reason for hope. There's been scientific progress, a real acceleration in terms of things like clean energy, carbon technologies, and generally just climate innovation. There's community action, there's local and youth-led efforts, that are really showing very powerful grassroots leadership. I think there's we've seen a lot of examples of that on a more general basis, but a lot of it is also involves climate change. And there's global cooperation, although not as quickly or as powerfully as we'd like. But the Paris Agreement, COP30, I think is this November in Brazil, and so there is that. And then I think that Alex touched upon sort of nature's resilience, the fact that many ecosystems can bounce back when they're given a chance. And so we have places like Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique that was ravaged by a civil war and then has been come back. Chesapeake Bay, coral reef recovery, things like that. And then finally, narratives of empowerment, that the real life success stories, I think inspire, a sense of agency and relief and belief, I should say.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. Well, thank you so much. Another question. How can educators integrate climate change into their curriculum in a school, a district, or a state where climate education isn't a priority? I should say isn't a priority yet. We're all going to get it there. But how can educators integrate climate change resources in those circumstances? Margaret, you want to take that?
Yeah, and so this is actually something we thought about a lot in Subject to Climate. And I think that we need to think of it as an integration of what you already teach, so that it's not a either or. Either I'm teaching my math curriculum or I'm teaching about climate change. In fact, I believe that climate is a great lens for all disciplines and subjects, where you can hit your learning goals, your teaching standards, and the added bonuses, you can engage your students more because it's real, it can be project-based, it's relevant, it's something that students can relate to. And if we go back to the first question you asked, Carrie, is, what is the state of climate education? Students want to learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, some examples is, with Subject to Climate, we have free resources where teachers have integrated it, and you can see how it's rooted in a math class or a social studies class or an English class. And it's truly engaging for students. So for example, there is a lesson plan that a math teacher wrote where students are given the opportunity to see how mathematicians and scientists use data analysis and statistics to determine how much our planet is warming. So they're creating data tables and scatter plots, and they're doing linear regressions to make predictions about the future. And you already have to do that in math class, right? But like now if students are doing that with their local data, I don't know why, actually, I do know why it's just more relevant, but my students, when they were thinking about what is happening in their own backyard, they're like, oh my goodness, I can predict the temperature rise in my own city. That is just more engaging in itself, for example. And you
Yeah.
even do it in elementary class too. We had an elementary teacher actually create something for K-2 where students test water absorption to model runoff in urban areas. So they pretend they're a landscape architect, then they're designing this rain garden, and what they're doing is they're composing two-dimensional shapes like rectangles, squares, triangles, which by the way is a Common Core math standard that you have to do anyways to create composite shapes. And they're doing that, but then they're really embodying like being a landscape architect. So in summary, I just think that, if it's not prioritized, it doesn't mean you have to do a trade-off. You can look at how it integrates into what you already teach. And now it's an added bonus that it's inquiry-based, it's project-based, and it's relevant.
That's really great. Well, I mean, it reminds me, one of the things that CFR Education offers is a project-based learning tool, which is simulations. And we have found that simulations are great for addressing hot button issues without pushing a particular perspective. Lively classroom discussions can be fueled with simulations that put students, in the case of the council, in the shoes of a member of either the National Security Council or the UN Security Council. But because we're a nonpartisan organization, we suggest multiple policy options for students to consider in an attempt to expand their perspective and also curb binary thinking and often partisan thinking, if you will. So simulations empower students to strengthen their civic discourse, to engage in their communities, and they help, we've seen, diminish climate anxiety. And another technique we find is to teach about other global issues that intersect with climate change without, using the buzzword of or buzzwords of climate change. For example, energy, migration, national security. You can teach about electric grids, fast fashion, sustainable agriculture, all of those things. The list goes on, as all of you know. But these topics really resonate with students. So that's sort of how we've approached this. Rob, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think I fully agree with both of you that the idea of sort of using curriculum connections to link climate to, to topics that are already required, that are already part of the curriculum, and that meet standards makes a lot of sense. So whether it's ecology or energy or the environment or any of the ones that you've mentioned, I think that's a natural way to go. In addition, I would think about leveraging museum resources. We and many other informal institutions have lesson plans, have videos, have various teacher supports to build climate literacy. You can teachers can introduce climate through stories of people and places and scientists, and those have the effect, I think, of humanizing climate science. And then I think, again, field trips is one that, at AMNH we're particularly fond of. And I think that can be whether we're talking about in-person field trips or virtual ones, I really think they can bring climate and climate change to life for students. They make it real, they activate curiosity, they build emotional connections. If they go someplace where they're seeing, green space development or restoration or wind wind turbines, those kinds of things, make it clear that there are solutions out there. They inspire action and hope. And then finally, I would just say, one can build, I'd encourage those teachers who may not otherwise feel so supported to build partnerships in community. Museums in particular offer ongoing support, even when their local resources are limited. So, for example, at the Museum of Natural History, we have a wonderful website, Ology, which is for kids sort of age 7 through 14. That is all that lets them explore science, and we'll talk about that more in our breakout group. But that's got a great climate change section as well.
That's really great. Alex, thoughts from the National Geographic?
Sure. And I think this is a really important challenge that educators in certain areas face. And at National Geographic, we have a great focus on storytelling. And I would encourage educators to bring the stories of people who do research on changes in our world to their students. We have curated great stories told by and about our grantees, and they're accessible to bring into multiple disciplines, into biology or earth science or social science. Just some examples, we have a community of over 100 of several thousand grantees that work in 150 over 150 countries around the world. And an example is a marine biologist from Sri Lanka named Asha Davos, and she studies blue whales and the changes to the ocean environment in the Indian Ocean. And her story is inspiring because she's done great work, but it's also connects to a place. Talk about marine science and or in earth science. You can talk about biology. It's a way to bring a personal story into the classroom that isn't going to be labeled as something that maybe you shouldn't be bringing into the classroom. We have a photographer named Caitlin Oakes who's telling stories about the farmers in the Colorado River Basin.
Oh, wow.
And the changes that they need to adapt to in an era of limited water resources. So these are the sort of stories that you can bring in to a classroom on various different topics.
I mean, storytelling is incredibly powerful. I can't say enough that how much we've learned that in our journey here in CFR Education. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been super informative. We have one more question, and then we'll have a brief Q&A before diving into breakout sessions with one of the organizations here. So the final question is, what does your organization bring to climate education that is unique? For those in the audience, listen carefully and start to think about which organization you might like to. I know you'd like to spend time with everyone, but which one you'd like to choose to spend a little more time with in a breakout session. So for example, in the case of education, what we bring that is unique is, again, we offer free, nonpartisan multimedia teaching and learning resources and programming as well, webinars and so forth, at the intersection of climate change and global affairs, from the fundamental science and history to the complex societal and political concerns that the issue raises. Our resources and programming are particularly appropriate for social studies disciplines and anyone who incorporates global issues into their curriculum. From here, why don't I throw it to Margaret? What unique aspect does your organization bring to climate education?
Thank you so much, Carrie. And so what we bring is that we're helping all educators, all grade levels and all subjects. So we have a free platform and we have a teaching resource library, number one, where we've curated, and a lot of the folks on this call, we've actually curated and added their resources as well, but we've curated over 2,700 teaching resources, aligned them to teaching standards, and we've enriched it with a synopsis, teaching tips, and scientist notes so that, for you, we want to do the heavy lifting for you. We just want you to put in, I teach this grade, I teach this subject. And if you want, you can even say, I'm doing this standard, or I'm going to be teaching about fractions or something like that. And we want to find we show you to the exact resource that you will be able to use in your classroom. And, sometimes that's not enough. It's that last mile that sometimes is like, well, I have this resource, but what do I really do with it? And that's why we also have teacher design materials, lesson plans, units, it's activities. It's like having an inside look in another teacher's classroom and going like, what is that 10th grade history teacher doing? And so you'll be able to see how to integrate climate change into what you already teach, among other resources like news articles that can be differentiated by reading levels, that is offered by the JUICE, and we've aggregated professional development opportunities. So it's really just a one-stop shop. So if you want to get started and you don't know where, I'd love to show you how in our breakout.
That's great. That's super exciting. I know we've been part of that and have really enjoyed the benefit of your curation. So thank you. Alex, what about National Geographic?
Sure. I want to point to two things in particular. We have a lot of resources in general for educators, but one of the most important things we've been working on recently is that we provide a free and open online mapping tool called MapMaker that we created with Esri, the GIS company. And it is really a lightweight GIS for exploring maps and geographic data. And it provides rich access to a curated set of maps and geographic data, and many of them are about climate change and aspects of the data that would feed into understanding climate change. So we'll show a demonstration of that. It's easy to use, I guarantee it. We've heard from many older people that it is, and that's the true test. And we also have our National Geographic Edu Hub, and it is a resource library for teachers with links to many, many different materials. But one of the things I'll point to that it has is materials related to the work of our grantees. So you can see a specific person to connect to that's doing work in a certain topic area. And there's their story and what they're working with as part of that Edu Hub. So in all the work that we do, we strive to activate the spirit of exploration in teachers and learners. And in our breakout session, led by my colleague Faye Gore, we're going to highlight MapMaker and the Edu Hub.
Fantastic. Rob, tell us about Museum of Natural History.
Okay, well, one thing I can tell you that is unique is that we were the museum that discovered T-Rex. So I could just stop there, but I won't.
No, keep going.
We're one of the world's largest natural history museums. We've been supporting teachers for over 100 years. I think that one of the things that really makes the museum distinctive is its large scientific staff. Over 200 scientists going on over 100 field expeditions each year. These are in areas of vertebrate and invertebrate zoology, anthropology, paleontology, earth science, biodiversity. And so those scientists really have a profound influence upon everything that happens at the museum. And they give, I think people tend to trust museums, and partly it's because I think they have a lot of scientific credibility. And that's really important when you're talking about a topic as complex as climate change. We turn the latest climate science into exhibits and programs that really helps people connect and understand. Our planetarium show, our beautiful climate wall that's linked to dynamic data that lets people understand, what climate change looks like across latitudes and over time, and has interactive mechanisms for them to play with those. We show how climate change affects New York City and nearby communities, not just distant places. And then we also provide science-rich courses and classroom-ready tools to support educators to teach climate change, and we'll talk about more of that in our breakout room. And finally, I would say, we host honest conversations, that are about uncertainty and emotion and climate solutions, all of which I think have the effect of empowering people.
I would say so. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I know that our audience is eager to, we're going to open it up for a Q&A here. And I will turn that over to the folks behind the invisible curtain here.
Thank you, Carrie. To ask a question, click the Q&A icon on your Zoom window and submit your written question. Panelists will address 2 to 3 questions from the audience now. You will be able to ask any remaining questions in the breakout room of your choice following the Q&A. We have a question from Alyssa. Question says, oftentimes a handful of teachers or even one teacher at a given school are a climate ed superstar, but are doing that work individually. How can we empower and encourage teachers on a much broader scale to tap into their power as educators and talk about climate change in a factual, age-appropriate manner while still meeting their curricular requirements? Over to you, panelists.
I can take a stab at that question. And, that actually is one of the things that we saw that, um, you know, there are amazing teachers doing amazing things. And I think that we can do better in giving them a platform and sharing their work. And so that's kind of one of the things we do with Subject Climate. Like, we share their resources, but we try to highlight their work so other teachers can learn from them as well. So I would say that if anybody in this call, like, if there's a way that you can amplify somebody else's work or even share, that is a way to give exposure to these teachers who are doing amazing things. And hopefully by sharing stories and just talking about it, we're going to be able to do this on a, a grassroots approach, in addition to us as organizations sharing the stories of each teacher. So I would say that, it's not on us, but don't stop talking about it.
Yeah, I agree with what Margaret said, and I think I would go back to some of the previous discussion about in terms of just fostering curriculum connections, and then that there and encouraging collaboration among teachers, and trying to meet teachers where they are, and to try to foster a greater community there, and again to take advantage of resources beyond the community, online digital resources as well.
And I'll just share that one aspect of sharing information is sharing information about available technology and tools. That it's not just about the subject matter; it's about tools that can help in the process of learning. And of course, we have a focus on mapping tools, but there's other tools that allow exploration of information by the students, in classrooms, but also on their own.
Thank you, panelists. Our next question says, do all of your resources require membership? My school does not reimburse us for memberships, and it can add up. Over to you, panelists.
I can begin that one. And none of our programs require membership. Some of them do require money. We have there is a course fee for the seminars on science courses, and a graduate credit cost and additional after that. I didn't have a chance to mention our partnership with Coursera. We have climate change and many other courses with them, and those are entirely free. And most of our resources, all the Allology and other one resources for learning for teachers are entirely free.
Yeah, and our EduHub resource library is entirely free. And as I noted, our MapMaker lightweight GIS tool is entirely free and open online geospatial tool. And there are enhanced benefits to setting up an Esri GIS account for your MapMaker and other tools. And we can work with teachers and school systems to actually get a free school-based account to take advantage of even more tools. So it's a little involved, but it's free.
And I'll just ring in here quickly and say that all CFR education resources are free as well and can be found on the CFR education website.
And me as well, all our resources are free. So we see ourselves as a connector to free climate resources for all K through 12 subjects.
Thank you. We have another question. The question is, what are your organizations doing around climate justice education?
So I can start up. Go ahead. Albert.
Thank you, Alex. The climate justice is an important topic at the museum, and it's infused into most or all of our climate change education programs. Climate change, trying to address the impacts of climate change is actually one of the museum's strategic goals. And climate justice is certainly implicit in that it's clear that that many of the most powerful impacts of climate change are falling upon people least able to address them or to deal with them.
One of the ways that what we're doing around climate justice is that, that one part on resource database, we do curate climate justice and environmental justice resources. So those are easily accessible, and you can type in justice, you can type in any of the keywords and find those resources, as well as having a teacher guide on how one might approach climate justice. The other thing we do is that for the teacher developed lesson plans, all of them go through not only a scientist review, but also a rubric. And we want to ensure that there are many elements that are touched upon in those lesson plans, one of which is centers on equity and justice. So all the exemplar lesson plans that are created by teachers all have elements of equity and a lens on justice. And then last of all, in our professional development, in our own professional development modules, we have many sections that talk about how one can thoughtfully integrate climate justice into what they already teach. So this is a really important pillar. I mean, our mission is empowering educators to easily and effectively teach about climate change, justice, and action. So I would say it's a core part of what we do in our organization.
Yeah, and I would just add that for National Geographic, it's one of the through lines for us is looking at environmental justice, looking at inclusion, and we have a global approach. So we are trying to make sure that we fund our grantees around the world in a very diverse group. And we look at the aspect of storytelling. If you want to change the story, you change the storytellers so that you broaden the people that are able to tell their stories. And those stories really give you an opportunity to understand all the communities that are affected in global change.
Thank you, everybody. One final question. Are there any plans to prioritize climate as a subject of its own at all levels of education?
One of the things I've seen is that there are a lot of schools that do have environmental science. I've seen that as a standalone subject, and I don't think that many schools, but some schools do have it as a standalone. But I do think that it can be something that is embedded in thoughtfully into all subjects and grade levels. And I know I've been saying this a lot, but one of the benefits of doing that is that students can look at it in different classes and really apply what they're learning into something practical. So I'm not sure, to be honest, I haven't seen many schools really take climate change as its own subject, but there's environmental sciences. However, I know in the state of Colorado, there in the US, there is something called the Climate Literacy Seal. So that is something that was developed by LIRA, an amazing nonprofit organization, and it just passed legislation in Colorado, which is that students can graduate with a climate literacy seal. So what that requires them to do is they have to do some sort of local action project, but they also have to, I believe, take a course on climate, but it doesn't have to be a standalone. It can be in the subjects that are already in school. So yeah.
My sense is that the trend right now is rather than try to break climate change or to set it up as its own subject, to integrate it, much as Margaret has been talking about, into other subjects, and as we've been talking about. I think it's worth pointing out that states like New Jersey, have passed have incorporated climate change into their learning standards so that climate change is to be integrated into across subjects and across grade levels, which I think is very powerful. And hopefully that trend will continue in other states.
Yeah, I think I would just second what Margaret and Rob have said, that making sure in this current time that we do our best to integrate climate change into the teaching of environmental studies, environmental science, earth science, social science, that there's a great opportunity to do that as an initial step, and that that's going to provide immediate results. The more we can do that and to bring it into the classroom that way, I think at the state and federal level is going to be much bigger task.
Thank you, panelists. We actually have time for one more question. So the final question is, what keeps you going when the outlook feels bleak? Is there a moment, idea, or experience that renews your resolve?
I think we just have no choice. I think this is this is sort of the challenge. This is one of the prime challenges of our generation, or of perhaps the next generation, I should say, from my standpoint. But I just think that we have, as scientists and educators, I think we have a tremendous ethical responsibility to take up this challenge because so much depends upon it.
And Varun was talking about local adaptation. I was very fortunate to be able to go and do field work in Nepal, in the Khumbu region near Mount Everest, and was talking with a local Sherpa family, and they were having to change what they were growing. Like, it had already reached that point, and they were very matter of fact about it. Like, we need to do this, and that sort of like, okay, we need to better understand the changes to the mountain environment here, which is what we were there for. And the adaptation is really something that provides an opportunity to look to the future. And I agree with Rob that looking to the future and how we work with this is really, really where the heart of it is and keeps you going.
Right. And like, one of the things is that I had mentioned that one of the strategies for helping youth feel not hopeless but activated is seeing what other people are doing. I would recommend that for ourselves, and that has certainly helped me as well. Surround yourself with people who are doing this work as well. The stories of what's happening in classrooms and stories of what students are doing, that is extremely motivating. On Friday, we had a panel during SF Climate Week, and students were there and they were sharing what they did in their schools to pass, policies around climate education. And that really motivates me. I also have a practical recommendation as well. I am part of a community called Work on Climate. It's a Slack community with 30,000 people in all industries. I like to look at other industries as well outside of education, and that keeps me going because I'm seeing the amazing work that people are doing as well. So that keeps me hopeful that we are a part of this strong movement and that there's so many of us together in doing this.
Thank you, panelists. Now we will open 4 breakout rooms, one for each organization, so that you can learn more about free resources and tools to integrate climate change into your classrooms. This includes a breakout room for CFR Education, the educational arm of the Council on Foreign Relations, the American Museum of Natural History, National Geographic Society, and Subject-to-Climate.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good session in the breakout room. I can't thank you enough for joining us today on Earth Day. It is a happy Earth Day in the sense that there's a huge mass of people on this call we're all doing our best to move the ball on this very difficult topic of teaching about climate change in this difficult time. So I just want to thank you all for doing the important work of helping prepare the next generation to navigate life as informed citizens, particularly on this topic of climate change. We're going to send you an email, a follow-up email, and there will be a recording of this event with important links shared during the meeting. And I hope that all of you will feel better equipped, more empowered to integrate climate education into your teaching. And if you haven't had a chance already, it would be great if you could explore more about CFR Education, National Geographic, the American Museum of Natural History, and of course, Subject to Climate. So with that, I just want to say happy Earth Day, everyone, and thank you again.